The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. We're just going to wait for a few minutes until people join us. Okay, I think we can begin. So thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Jana Pargova and I'm the Communication Manager for the Smart Cities Information System. The topic we have today is challenges for innovators and policymakers to roll out smart innovations. And we have with us as a speaker Jorge Nunes Ferrer. Some of you may know Jorge. He's a senior research fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies. He's also a recognized specialist in EU budgetary and financial instruments and is also involved in new smart city policies. He's an integral part of the development of the Smart Cities Information System with a focus on non-technical issues which affect the performance and results of smart cities projects, as well as the policy recommendations we provide to the European Commission, which is our topic today, in fact. Before we start, you can have a look at the dashboard you have from GoToWebinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the question box in the control panel, and we will have time to discuss them at the end. You can also try and raise your hand, and we will address your questions after the presentation. Before I give the floor to Jorge, I will just briefly present the Smart Cities Information System for those of you who are not familiar with the initiative. So the Smart Cities Information System is an initiative launched by the European Commission with the aim to become a point of reference for the smart cities community, to interconnect all the data and know-how from projects in one place, and to make it available for different stakeholders, cities, project coordinators, experts. The graphic you see on your screen illustrates the flow of information and the results from projects to the Smart Cities Information System to our different stakeholders. What is more, we don't just present project results, but we also analyze them, which allows us to establish best practices, which will enable project developers and cities to learn and replicate smart solutions. We also identify barriers and lessons learned with the aim of finding better solutions for technology implementation and policy development. And based on this, we provide recommendations to policymakers on support and policy actions needed to address the market gaps. this brings us to our topic today, and now I will give the floor to Jorge Nunes Ferrer.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Yes, I will show you my screen. I wanted to show you also my face. That's me. Yes, you see me. So I'm sitting here. In fact, I'm sitting in Barcelona today because I'm off. I will be back in Brussels next week, but I'm connecting, and I hope the Wi-Fi will work well enough and that you can all hear me well. So what do you see? Okay, I see there the screen. I'm going to look, I have to open this one and launch my presentation. And I will also eliminate my face so it doesn't interfere with you, but so you can see who I am. So my subject today is really to speak about the challenges for innovators and policymakers to roll out smart innovations. As you can see in this presentation at the bottom, you have two publications that are coming out now from SCIS. These are lessons that have been learned by speaking with project promoters, but also by looking at the literature, learning from cases and finding information around that exists to help innovators that want to do a project, or especially city administration want to take over innovations, take over projects from the SCIS, or want to do them. And then so we have one that is replication scale-up of innovations in Europe. This is to help really the projects then enter and go further, to be replicated, to enter the market, let's say, and how to take new ideas and to put them in a city in a way that is coordinated. The second publication is one about policy recommendations. This goes further. This is really a higher level. This one is the first, the green publication is really dedicated to the ones that want to do something. The second publication want to create the framework to do things. These are the policymakers, which can be at local, at national, at EU level. So the two publications have a different focus. Let me start with this. So I have here this title: multi-level, multi-layered integrated planning and policy. And that is a bit the issue with the smart cities. We have the situation where cities have to participate. If you think about it, it is a moment where cities have to really get involved into more than their local issues and solving problems of housing and transport at local level. They also have to participate in a multi-level decision making because of energy and climate problems. And cities are extremely important, as they are indirectly responsible for 70% of consumption of energy and also the production of greenhouse gases, sometimes directly or indirectly, but they are very big players. So they enter a multi-level policy-making situation where you need to have the right coordination. It's multi-layered because there are different layers of services and infrastructures that have to be coordinated to be efficient, have to be integrated because you need to have the different sectors integrating. So it is really a very big change on the way cities have been operated for a long time. So, and then we have the issue about how to apply policies, and later is how to also improve them. So you really have a lot of issues. As I said, globalization, climate change, ICT, energy, climate goals, they require really new governance structures in cities. The supranational frameworks and local governance become more important for impact and efficiency. You need a framework that is global, but you need also local governance that is very active and very well designed so that you have impact at local level, because without the impact at local level, you cannot solve the global problem. So this means that you have really an issue of efficiency at local level that is becoming more and more important. So cities having to deal with a responsibility that's quite serious. But you need the supranational framework to operate, and also the national, of course, but the national, again, is an intermediate stage between the supranational and the local. So we have a challenge for cities. That means that cities have to go more and more into really planning. I mean, cities always planned, but one thing is planning for reacting to a demand. You have a new zone, a new factory, and whatever, and there is a demand for transport. You buy some buses, you get some trains, you have some choices, but now there is a need to plan more holistically and integrated with objectives that are at much higher level, like the emissions and transport, and there is this need also to not work anymore in silos, where you have the waste, people dealing with waste separate from the ones dealing with energy. You have to go further and further to what I think is a link that's very similar to circular economy idea, where you need things to go together, so you create efficiencies. So planning becomes much more important instead of just reacting to some problem and demand in the city. So it requires a lot of coordination. Then cities administration need to treat citizens differently and businesses differently, because they are now like consumers and stakeholders. It means they are not just users of services, but they also create services. They are really much more part of what is needed, and that's where consultation becomes more important, as they have to adopt a lot of the things the city authorities want and participate in a certain change their behavior. So there's a challenge for national governments and the EU, which is to review all the competences from local to EU level to develop a correct framework so that you can get this efficiency at the different levels. So you have the right distribution of competences. So it's a very, let's say, complex, multi-layered situation. So it's not only about how a city can take and adopt something, is what is the framework to adopt them. So these two publications are trying to deal with this complex issues, taking also into account the lessons from projects. So in the publications you will find examples of the different things that you will hear now in this presentation, but in the presentation I just keep to the level of statements and general things, and then maybe we have the time, maybe I can mention about a project or another, but it's really this is really like the overall higher level lessons that I'm going to present and the reason why. So first of all, let's focus on the cities, the innovation and replication challenge. So first, I mean, this is what I mentioned, but let's quickly, this comes actually from a design that was from the International Electrotechnical Commission. It's actually from a publication by, I think it was Mitsubishi that did it in some publication. I found it quite interesting because they have this description of different layers, and they are trying to find out how to make the efficiency between the quality of life, the transport, the infrastructures, and what they call life service applications at top level, and then going down into different infrastructures, houses, offices, facilities, and then you go into the energy, water, waste, and of course, well, I said transport before, but it's the mobility, ICT. So you have different levels of structures that are operating at different points, the invisible ones, the more visible ones, and this they have to be working together. So you have this infrastructure layers, and this is how somehow I found it useful to think at cities as having these layers and having to communicate and connect. So I put the picture there. It's a useful. But the issue is the strategy and city planning. That now, first of all, for cities, I'm now going to talk about cities. The city administrations really should be having a cross-sectoral visioning and co-creation program system to decide things. I will describe what that is. It is simply to take the most important players in the city and to work together to produce a plan that is coherent. And I'm speaking here about a detailed plan, not just a vision of what people want and some milestones. Really go deeper, because we need to really work into really practical things. There is not so much time here. People might think that 2050 is far away. 2050 is very close. especially in infrastructure terms. So you need to have the different people responsible for the city, and even some representatives from the social level of the business users, to think together about solving things, and also so that they learn about the limitations and problems and thoughts of other sectors in the city. That's why I found that this interesting. It's not just something to have a nice good 2 days. It's really to work hard to have some common ideas that can work. I have here a list of available guidance that I have. That this is in the presentation, but there are more in the publications. And some of them are like very interesting. Is the European Commission 2016, because it describes how to go into integrated smart cities and solutions. But we have some very interesting extras, like from the European Investment Bank. I found that they are doing a project on how they should evaluate projects. And when you're speaking about projects, it has to enter market application, especially, but also demonstration plans. If you want them to intervene, you will see what their criteria are. This is for the Mediterranean. They're doing for other sectors, but I think that some of the points in this publication are really useful generally to think how a person sees it from the other side as a business model. Do you have something that can continue forward? So they have this question, so you can see how as a project you will be evaluated. So it's quite useful for city administrations, project developers, to see how will others look at me, especially if they are financiers. So I found that publication particularly interesting. Have methodology and vision and backcasting that I was talking about, but there are many others. So here you have from the Commission how they see the steps to develop a city. I'm not going to dwell in it too much. You have this, the publication is there, but I found it interesting reading it, is because from the experience on this project that is called Pokazito of P7, we found that it was more interesting to have the SWOT analysis done by a specialist before, so that you have a framework to start discussions, thinking strategic vision, not to have people doing the strategic vision without having a full analysis of the city's situation, the strengths, weaknesses, and also even challenges for the future and trends. So it's better to start with people having some background information before starting visioning. But what I mean with this is that while there are guidelines and you have different publications, always remember first that you can do it differently, and second, it has to be done differently depending on which country you are. We did this in several countries and cities of different sizes, and it is totally different. The relationship between the people is very different if you are doing this in a city like we had Istanbul, or if you are in a small town in Denmark. I mean, the relationships between people are different, and it has to be adapted when you do a strategic vision of the city's development with people. But here you have the steps, and it is important to go very carefully and plan carefully the city's steps to have a combined system and an efficient system afterwards. The selection of projects. Now we go into, once the strategy is done, you have an overall strategy with some goals and some common vision and moments where to do, for example, a legal change, how to move step by step. I cannot dwell on that. There is a very big work behind it. But once there is some kind of clarity of what has to be done, projects have to be selected. This is a difficult job. So we will discuss now is, first of all, how technologies can be selected, how they can help achieving the strategic goals. It's particularly important that they fit the overall strategy. Of course, money is always an issue, and one financing source still available, but what business models, what other ways of getting the funding, how can it be funded, not only from public purses and grants, but also from loans or even from the users. So for each project, one has to think very carefully what are all the options, also because public sector, especially at the moment, is not particularly limitless on the capable of financing unlimited amounts of money for projects. The other issue is very important is the regulatory framework, and this will come into that because very often it is not the finance nor is the technology the real barrier to many projects. Many projects die on things that are regulatory and legal and rules and obligations that are national, local, that at a certain point just kill the projects because they don't allow certain actions. And then the other issue is stakeholders become more and more important in all of these projects. How do we engage them? Who do we engage? At what time? So these are issues that have to be addressed in all cases. We also need to choose the right technology for that. So how do we do this? The impact assessments or feasibility studies are necessary. They should be performed. There are different also publications. There are mentions in this that we do. There are different methodologies to do it, and they need to be taken into account, of course, externalities and the project has to fit. The externalities are particularly important because many projects in the energy efficiency sector and other sectors need to be financed by something there's no direct effect of the project. It may be some benefits, environmental benefits, but maybe, or they're working on other things like savings. They're not something that is created new, but something that is avoided, for example. So it is important in these studies to take into account all of the steps. And there are different factors that have to be assessed. The European Commission has here a publication, the 2016 one I mentioned. They were having a list on dimensions that have to be taken into account: technology, social, cultural, political, and economic, and I have questions. However, I had another publication that is from some years ago in which I was also involved, although I was just helping to put the ideas together by experts from cities. There was a very long list of the impacts with potential of CO2 reduction, potential for renewables, increased energy efficiency, and so on. And they were really like, they had like 13, 14 categories. And then we had the scoring, and the scoring then allows to see. So not only the questions are important, is the technology well established, to see behind in the question. These are nice questions, but when you have the scoring, it allows you to see different technologies and really find out which goes better for what. So it goes into one step deeper than the first list, but it's a different publication. But as I said, choosing the right technological approach is, of course, a prerequisite for application, but there is no guarantee that it will be successful. And I will discuss a bit also the non-technological factors has to be overcome. We have financial costs, the capex, the capital costs, the beginning are very often high. And the benefits of many of the technologies for smart cities is actually in the operation, it's savings or efficiency. But and then although maybe the projects in their lifetime are beneficiary financially and socially to the city, it is from the budgetary point of view on the annual budget a pain. But there has to be a shift from the capital expenditures, thinking of budgets, to one of operational and long-term and life cycle. Otherwise, many projects will not happen, while quite bad projects, even more costly over the lifetime, will be chosen. There has to be a lot more exploration to find avenues from the private sector risk sharing. How do you share risk with private sector? For example, public-public partnerships. There are holding funds, urban funds that can allow to financing with EIB support, for example. The urban funds of the EIB are there. So there are the ESCOs that can operate for operating grids, and the consumers will be paying from the savings. So there are many options, and that has to be explored. And it is there's quite a lot around, but there are also advisory hubs, and a recommendation for cities to really, town all over, is to really pay attention to what there is. There is the Innofin advisory hub that is looking at financial instruments and support from different sources for replication, for co-financing innovations. And then there is the EPEC. This is the European PPP, public-private partnership advisory group, and they really can help to learn. It's quite hard, and this is as much for a city issue than at national level, because the rules have to be available to allow this kind of methods. Of course, there is a recommendation to copy best practices for other towns. I will come to them, because there are a lot of best practices appearing, and some of the lessons on some places are simply not, I mean, sometimes they are known, but not necessarily taken into account, or something is done to create the right framework to operate at national level, and to allow also the cities to operate well and have good results. We have something called spread shareholding, which is good for projects, which is where the beneficiaries can be shareholders of the project, maybe also run by an ESCO, maybe run another way. So this is quite useful, and it has been seen, like in Denmark, for district heating, because difficult to convince people to connect to it. People like to have their own little system. But another thing is they are shareholders of the whole operation. So there are a lot of shareholding opportunities in many places, but they are not very common. So this is one solution that is important to solve the financial cost problems. Another thing is green bonds. This can be really at very high level, like EIB has a green bond scheme. Or it can also be at the municipal level or at national level, where there are possibilities to invest into projects, and through a bond system from outside. So there are solutions, and they have to be taken into account. And many local authorities have not experimented, or are actually worried about getting involved in this, because it's not in what they have been doing until now. And of course, there are leading cities that manage, but the question is that there are thousands of towns and cities in Europe, and many will have not gone very far, and we need most of them to work. The other thing is, a recommendation is really national governments also, that they can help where they have a power on this. This, of course, on grant subsidies, but issues like VAT reductions for certain actions and so on. So there are different countries use different opportunities, and there are ways also to, let's say, provide the subsidy by simply putting a lower VAT and encouraging behavioral change. So there are a lot of options available, but at different levels. Now let's go to the next step. I don't see it changing on your screen. This is, I'm a bit concerned. Yes, okay, no, this is another. Okay, I will, yeah, this is only because I have an emergency screen to see what you see, but that one is blocked. So let's go now to the subnational regulatory and administrative factors. As I mentioned earlier, at local level,
Jorge, we lost you, I believe. Apologies about that. As usual, some technical difficulties. You're back. Good.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'm back,
the
but
slide
only
changed.
partially. The slide changed. No, I saw that something was going wrong, because I'm having another screen showing me everybody. But okay, now you can hear me and everything is right?
Yes.
No, it's just the signal went a bit weak, and I think it's always, yeah, it's 11 o'clock. Yeah. Let's see. Let's go. So the one thing that I don't know if you heard me on the VAT reductions, Jana? I
believe so. Or
yeah, the VAT. Okay, so I was just this slide. Okay, I will go now from the subnational, because I don't know when you stopped hearing me. So, okay, let's go to subnational regulatory and administrative factors. As I mentioned, these are the worst cases that we saw that simply, and not only subnational, also national, but let's start with the subnational ones. The problems at the level of rules at local levels, at practices that have been there, and also, of course, the administrative capacity of places to handle new systems have created a lot of barriers for many projects. So one of them is so you have administrative burdens are quite one of the complaints of many projects of SCIS and well beyond SCIS. So there is an issue with interdepartmental coordination, and even coordination at local multi-level. I have to say, this is another case, is when you have a local municipality that is inside higher municipality. Many towns you have, for example, let's say metropolitan authority, and then you have municipalities underneath, and sometimes there is no coordination, no combination, and you need to have the permit for some things by one and for other things by the other. So there is really a lack of interdepartmental coordination in many towns and in many administrations. And when a project is integrated and deals with different things, from water to transport to buildings, and this is what we need in the future, well, sometimes the permit for one is banned from another one. There is no real coordination. There are other cases, for example, that if someone is changing a certain infrastructure, it comes into the rules of, I mean, something in buildings, it comes to the rules, to the offices that are dealing with historical places in the town, while the ones that deal with the actual light and infrastructure is another one. So if you, depending where putting the same lamp, it may be one authority or the other. One may ban it for one street and not for another. So you have cases that are quite complex in some projects and have put a lot of trouble to project developers. And the question is, for towns, please try to make sure that there is a coordinated way to handle this, and that rules don't contradict each other, because this also exists. I have a case that is not SCIS, where there have been panels allowed, solar panels on the ceilings of some houses, and then the people were penalized by the another office because these houses were historical, and although the panels you could not see them because the ceilings are flat in the town, but they were banned then by another authority that was dealing with the looks of the town. So and they were penalized, although they were getting even subsidies from the solar panels. This is an extreme case, but this has happened in one town. So this should never happen. And it's a very strong message, because a lot of projects have this. And the next is of course, and as I said, the outdated rules also appear, that when there are technology advances, regulations have to follow. So historical buildings rules, for example, have to adapt to the changes in the technology, because some technologies allow to maintain, for example, the historical character of a town, some new technologies, while introducing energy efficiency or different windows or some things. And this is sometimes not reflected in the rules that will just ban the changes. Now, another important point is the stakeholder engagements. This stakeholder engagement becomes crucial for any projects that has been chosen for energy efficiency in buildings. The stakeholders will be in the building, but for transport, it will be users and so on. This is because to get an efficient system, one has to make sure that the uptake is in line with the expected. There are many. You can have perverse effects, where, for example, rebounds effects, where a system to improve traffic creates more traffic, because you have freed the roads from some congestion, and then people start using the car more. So you have a lot of cases that one has to be careful what is the impact of one decision or another. And stakeholder engagement is important, not only for the stakeholders to get to adopt a different behavior, but also for the project developers, the city authorities, to actually discover in a certain area what people are going to be doing with what is planned or how they see it, so they can be adapted. So there are lots of good practices. Most projects in the SCIS system have included approaches to stakeholders, and there are specific techniques. And see, for example, one project is the Citizen, where that shows how discusses with stakeholders potentials, how things can be done, and they participate in designing solutions for specific projects. So this is really a Citizen project. It's dedicated only to this, but there are many other projects that have approaches to stakeholders. One of the issues that has to be looked at is really where the legal framework is causing troubles. One of the most important cases in energy efficiency is with building refurbishments. Some projects work in one town and over the border in this exactly the same situation over the national border. It doesn't work at all, the system. This is simply because of the legal requirements and legal rights and obligations of owners and tenants. Who has the power to do something? The owner of the building or the tenant of the building? Who has to give a permission? Who cannot? And the laws can really ruin the potential to do energy efficiency in a building. So engagement with stakeholders is good, but without the laws being in place, then things don't work. And you can see this in some towns where you go. In some cities, you will see that energy refurbishments of buildings are done in the whole building. If you arrive into a town in a city where you see individual flats having been refurbished and the others still in the old looks, this is usually because the law gives the permission to the tenants to say no to changes in the building. So this is just a very visual effect, and you just have to travel a bit to see this from one country to another. You can see the differences. So we are getting to the end. Just very quickly, some national new policy aspects, and this is from the publication on policy recommendations. So the first message is the empowering local authorities to do things. Every country has different competences between the higher level, the national level, and the local level. So there is one recommendation is that member states should really try to review the competences in line with the subsidiarity principle, given the new situation. I mean, we have energy and climate objectives. The cities become more and more important for the reduction of emissions. And there are moments where the municipal authorities, they want to improve things, but they can't. They just get stuck because of the way the responsibilities are, how the competences are distributed. So there need to be, for example, they allow the creation of some tailored fiscal incentives. In some countries, the local authorities have no power to impose their own level of charges for certain things, or even congestion charges are not always in the hands of the city authorities to take such a decision, but they may be very useful. So some local fees and charges. The transport system, there are towns that have the municipality has a lot of power over certain streets, but the main streets that cross the town from one side to the other, the most important streets are at another level, at the regional level or the national level. The national authority or regional authorities have no capacity to control certain roads that cross the middle of the town. This, of course, makes it difficult, and there should be a little bit of spring cleaning, would not be bad. Then, of course, there is the need to invest also, even when the competence in this, to the local capacity to set up the such things as PPPs, and of course, so getting not only the competence but also the training. This is for the lack of capacity, sorry, the timing difference. Then then there is the issue about public procurement. Sorry for the typo. Reforming public procurement rules and encouraging the use by local authorities is very important, because even if the rules allow for innovation, integration of innovations, then the local authorities have to have the capacity to do this kind of procurement. I mean, not every town is a powerful big town, or and has the capacity to do this. And we discussed this from capital expenditures to operational expenditures, and also to introduce things like two-stage procurement, competing pilot projects. This means that once there is a first selection, there are pilot projects to test different options, and then the best one will go through. So not only choosing one. So these are all ideas that has to be tested. There are different examples around Europe and even beyond Europe, and it's good to try to find the best ways to encourage this. There are lots of publications on that, and I would say that the best specialists are in ICLEI. They have published a lot of reports on public procurement. So if you want to do public procurement, you can look at them. Now I will discuss private investment issues and some messages from that the project promoters have for the Horizon 2020. First, the private investment. There is a risk that the policies are not stable, and this has happened in several member states because of the crisis and other reasons. And one recommendation for member states is to try to have a stable regulatory framework to attract investments for renewable energy solutions, energy efficiency. If the rules are changing all the time, people are losing the trust on the system. This has happened already in some countries, so it's just a recommendation for member states trying not to do it. And most importantly is, if the systems need to change, is to find the least disruptive transition to new regime. So a new regime may be acceptable from stated rules, EU rules. It doesn't mean it is one that is good for the investors, or one that preserves their rights. So there have been cases, there are many legal cases in Europe now against several member states because of changes of rules. And of course, it affects all the cities that wanted to introduce more renewables. If then the law changes radically, the plants go down to the water. I know from a couple of towns in these cases where they had plans for the renewable energy and the future of the town, and they have been all gone in a change of the national regulations. So the recommendations is not to do something without considering the transition, and to avoid disruptions for existing investors, and to make it clear to the new ones that are coming, and help having a good framework. The last one is adapting the Horizon 2020. This is from projects that are having comments for really the Commission, that are proposing, and of course you can come with more ideas. This is just a really a small summary. One of the main issues that were coming is to focus even more on large-scale district and city-level projects. I mean, this is happening already with the lighthouse projects, but people are saying this is really what has to be looked at system change, at whole structures instead of looking at specific areas. There has been more requirement to do more research on actual business models, and doing how to do public-private partnerships, for example, but other models, how to really create finding solutions that are adapted to these new governance needs. A good balance between the technical and not technical requirements is also required for projects, because the projects now need to involve stakeholders and have co-creation, sometimes add a lot of other environmental and social outcomes. But there is still a feeling for some project promoters that there are many requirements on this, but the actual indicators are not clear actually what is wanted from this. And then ultimately, the most important thing in the projects is the reduction in energy use and reduction in emissions, but and all the other things are not clear how they fit. They feel a bit lost sometimes. Another thing is to have the less bureaucracy, or more adapted, let's say, to going towards results. To have less focus also in the R&D projects on the returns to investment, because R&D projects are, even demonstration projects, face problems that normally are not faced when the technology is tested and mature. So some of the costs are really due to innovative testing. And then if the returns to investment show that there are too too low, it will discourage investment with technologies that in great part, once they're tested, are have good returns. So they are really saying, please don't do too much, don't focus too much on this. And the last thing that is very important is to have a robust monitoring protocol and reliable and consistent key performance indicators, so that all the projects, when they are proposed and when they are tested, it's very and the results are compared, that's really, we are speaking exactly on the same kind of criteria, and it helps at all levels. Also, this is for the Horizon projects, of course, the requirements, and there are projects dealing with this, like for example, City Keys is a project that is dealing with KPIs. But this is also a message to practically all authorities that you cannot select a proposal from another one if they don't have the same way of measuring, like emission impacts or energy reductions. If the methodology is not comparable, you will not have the same results. That's it. This is my long presentation. I think now it's open for questions.
Jorge?
And let's see, I see some here.
Yes, you can either raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can ask your questions, or you can type in the questions into the questions box in the GoToWebinar dashboard. So yeah, Jorge, we have one question. Do you see it?
Yes, I see that there is there a special attention where for the case of island cities, especially for small island case. There are, I know that in the SCIS, there are some cities that are located in some of the islands, like the Balearic Islands, in Menorca, I think. So I know, I don't know, I have it now in my hand, there are 140 demonstration sites, so I don't know which one now was which, but there are some, but it's not that there is some kind of special attention work for the island cities. Not sure, of course, in this island they will be looking at the specificities of the place. But I'm not aware of a project that only deals of small islands. This means that there is not one project where all the towns are all of them in islands, but you can find towns in islands in projects. So that's what I can what I gather. I see another question from Michael Edelstam. Which cities or consortia stakeholders would you say are leading the development of new businesses and investment models for smart sustainable cities? There are new projects that I think from the business model point of view, we have the projects like the one is Remurban, another one is Replicate. They are looking, especially also Replicate is obvious what it is. So these are projects that are looking at the development of new businesses. All of the new lighthouses put quite a lot of weight on this. So this are not the only two projects. Of course, in the website you can find all the projects, and you will easily also discover which ones they are. But this, for me, are the ones that have brought to me more information in these issues. Then I have here another question. What city would you recommend to look up in terms of city vision specific smart city projects? In fact, on city vision, I'm looking at the project that is not even the SCI's group, but again, there are quite a few projects that are looking at to projects and smart cities, and of course there is like Citizen that would be in the SCIS, and then in the report there is a mention of another project, but I don't want to do publicity for the projects. So there are some, and of course all of the lighthouse projects, they all have all of these projects have the development of smart city projects or city visions and getting stakeholders together. So you have also in some projects of School of the Future where the neighborhood people are being met. So it's quite a lot of projects are experimenting there. So, and I wouldn't say one is better or worse. It depends at what level you are operating, at the level of the project or the city. But the level of the city, I would say urban, for example, and but it's not the only one. Internal governance question here. Question about cities' internal governance. Although the city's vision and strategy point to more cross-sectoral collaboration, there is a huge gap, as you mentioned, between the strategic and management depths within municipalities. Oh, this is a long question. So it's about the collaboration that they don't collaborate, the city authorities, the different departments. Is there a good example of municipalities who have a more holistic management approach? A good example. That's a good question. A difficult one to answer. I mean, different cities have different approaches. I'm now sitting, for example, in Barcelona, which has created some overarching metropolitan area authorities to try to coordinate. Already, some aspects are coordinated at the metropolitan area. For example, the transport is no longer divided. That seems logical, but it doesn't happen everywhere. But that's the most obvious because we need to have the transport integrated. But this is one of the cases where the city tries, the different municipalities try to create an overarching authority above. But I have to say it is in development, so there are tensions, of course, to shift the competence to one level to another. I'm think that for every town is different, and I don't really have an answer which ones are the best or not. This is one example. So many. I can unfortunately have a couple of examples when it doesn't work at all, but I will not try to give bad publicity on this webinar. Now, let's try to go. Is there any way to connect innovation, smart, and energy poverty problems in cities and urban areas? Yes. There is, of course, and this is very important when one of the things that is very important when one does smart cities projects. It's also to forget a little bit the word smart city, and to forget a little bit the technical aspects. It's to be aware of the wider needs of the cities, city authorities, especially mayors. They signed the Covenant of Mayors, and of course they're all signing up for reducing emissions and reducing energy use. But their main concern, for most of them, the real concern is about that to be re-elected, let's say, to also deal with the citizens. And cities are competing now with other cities like never before, on living standards, on opportunities, on business opportunities, on their capacity to attract the best people. So they also need to solve social problems. It's very important for mayors to handle the social problems of the citizens. So I would say that there is not only a way, but it's also necessary that projects deal with several objectives at the same time, and that they're in line with local needs. And some of the projects in the Smart Cities Information System are actually doing this. Yeah, at project level or at higher coordination level, most of them really are looking at what is the impact of the project beyond just the smart energy systems. Can we handle social problems in the area where the project is being put on? And that's only important to be also selected, to be honest. It's not just an issue, you know, a project that has very big reductions on emissions may not be the most interesting one for some city authorities. One more question here: what are the most future-looking financial community stakeholders aside from the EIB that are developing new financial tools for investment models? Well, that's a difficult question. There are even some private banks that are into it, but I have seen some of them. I'm not a private banking specialist. I know that there are banks that are trying to look at this, but of course, private banking has some limitations. But you can find some of the, apart from the EIB, there are other national promotional banks that are very involved. You have in Germany the KfW, Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau. This is the old name, but this is KfW that is having important parts of it, then important models. But you can also look at places like the Caisse de Dépôt in France, has had quite a lot of projects. And let me think about some other. Well, there is Casa dei Depositi in Italy. They do participate in some of them. So there are financial stakeholders that are involved. That's certainly the case. I was giving here the worst practice would be extremely useful, given a constructive way. Well, not in the town I'm sitting now, but the town I'm usually sitting. We do have issues where several municipalities in a relatively small town are not collaborating between them. So you could have one municipality closing roads and trying to solve problems of traffic and congestion in this one, but then shifting all the problem to the next municipality. This is and actually not coordinating with the full. So these are cases where at the lower municipality simply finds itself in difficulties having ideas, because also at there is little communication with the higher one, or the higher municipality level cannot coordinate all of them, and then at the end you start having some taking decisions that are affecting really neighboring municipalities. And this is one town. You have towns that have many municipalities, and there is no good coordination at the higher level. You have this in one of the projects, and this is in this happened in Turkey. There is one case, and this is in one of the reports, where simply the higher municipality, the metropolitan one and the local one, don't collaborate, and the project could not go on because there was even no communication. Things were not moving forward, and the project needed to push and get to higher level to get action and to have some political support. So you could not rely on the normal procedure. So these are examples of practice of things that should not happen. And then there are a lot of little ones that are. There was a case, but this was resolved. So I can say that Italy reformed it, but I don't know if other countries have the same problem. Very easy to block a project if someone complains about any process. So it's easy to block even if you don't have a real case. And this has happened with procurement process, where a company is selected to, for example, transport the bricks to the building site, and then another company that tendered, they just put a complaint saying this procurement process was not good. And it's enough to block until they verify. Well, after several times of this, the project was abandoned. So you have, this is not, if systems have to be in place not to allow abuses of this kind. So there are examples here and there, but I think the coordination between several municipalities in towns, it's a problem. I mean, I was saying where I'm working in Brussels, there are 19. It's not a massive town. It is. There are 19 municipalities in half the size than the central municipality of Barcelona that has 3 million inhabitants. So there is one municipality of 3 million inhabitants. Of course, there are many municipalities in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, but one is, they are significant size. there we have 19 in half the size of the town of Barcelona. So there, and they don't coordinate. These kind of things should be have to be resolved, and they're trying to resolve it. I have to give them that there are attempts, but it is difficult and very complicated. These are all the questions that I got. It's 11:30, so I think I have to pass it to Jana now. Jana? I don't know.
Sorry, I'm here. I also muted myself.
Okay, I thought I was speaking to myself for an hour.
No.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Jorge, for your presentation and for addressing the questions. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And we will send you the recording of this webinar. You can also download the handout, Jorge's presentation from the handouts section. We will also send that to you by email. And if you have any other questions, please, you can address them after the webinar as well. Thank you very much for joining and have a good day.